All right, we're all set.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular February meeting of the Blaine County School District Board of Trustees, held this 9th day of February 2021. Madam Clerk, if you would call the roll, please.
Trustee Larna,
Present.
Trustee Stone,
Present.
Trustee Turner,
Present.
Trustee Gorham,
Present.
Trustee Rourke.
Present. All members of the Board of Trustees are present, so there is a quorum. I'll call the meeting to order. Before we get started, I just want to mention that at 7 p.m., I will call a recess and hand the virtual gavel over to our co-chair. I have my vaccine appointment tonight, which I don't dare miss. So we'll go through the rest of this, I think, rather expeditiously. I assume everyone has received copies of the agenda. Are there any motions to amend or in any other way add to the agenda? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion that we approve the agenda as written.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Ayes have it. The motion carries. The next matter is the consideration of minutes. We have the minutes from our January 19 special meeting or regular meeting, our January 21 special meeting, and our January 27th special meeting. Are there any questions about those minutes? Any additions or amendments to those minutes? All right, then I'll call the question. Although, if someone will give me a motion to approve the minutes for those three meetings.
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Agenda is approved. Next matter is the consideration of the monthly financial reports. Mr. Fletcher is here with us. Does anyone have any question or comment about those monthly financial reports? Yes, go ahead, Trustee Stone.
I have one question. We usually have a lot more reports on there than just the one, and I wondered if he could explain why that is.
I would have to take a look at that, Trustee Stone, and see which reports are missing. I thought we sent them all in, so I'll have to circle back around with Vicki and touch bases on that.
Okay, thanks.
All right, based upon what we have, any other questions? Yes, go ahead, Trustee Turner.
Just the monthly question on how you feel we're tracking to budget, Brian?
So yes, thank you for the question, Trustee Turner. We are tracking by the data that's in that report. We are tracking almost bullseye. It's about an $8,000 difference between our estimated revenues received versus budgeted and revenues, our expenses paid versus budgeted. So between the variance of those 2 points, we're almost dead eye. Now, one aspect that we are working on and still need to complete is as when we paid the COVID dollars in November for the funds associated with that CARES Act, the monies associated with that were charged to the general fund. So when we transfer that over to a federal fund to match up with the revenues that we received associated with those COVID dollars, that will vacate expenses by about $1 million in the general fund. So we're actually tracking very well.
Mm-hmm.
Next week, we will get our update in regards to possibly Friday. It all depends on, the date is February 15th. So sometimes that means it's the Monday after the 15th or it's the Friday before if it falls on the weekend. But we will get more update information in regards to how our revenues are tracking because the calculation should be done in regards to the foundation formula. So that's really where we are able to better ascertain how we're trending and tracking for our general fund revenues from the state, which is about 40% of our budget. So it's not the majority, but it certainly has a major impact. So we'll have more information once that data is presented and provided to us by the state.
Trustee Stone, go ahead.
Could you remind us what the foundation formula is?
Yeah, sorry, I'm speaking in code again. I apologize for that. So the funding that comes to us from the state, the biggest pieces of that come through what's called the state's foundation formula. And that is a calculation that takes a whole set of criteria that are involved with it. But the biggest pieces are student attendance, average daily attendance, and to a lesser degree, their staffing in where they fall in regards to the years of experience and their educational level. So those are factors that come together to determine that largest portion of our funding that comes from the state. One of the things that we've been talking about that originally the state board had issued a request that the calculation be done this year on enrollment versus average daily attendance because of the COVID-19 drop off in enrollment just basically across the board. Most districts, particularly the larger ones, have seen a significant rollback through the first portion of the year in regards to their enrollment. So the legislature has been discussing this topic. So it could very well be that we stick with how the statute is defined, which is average daily attendance, and not go to enrollment. So the expectation is we will actually be paid on average daily attendance. So more information on that. That has had a bit of a rippling effect through districts across the state. So it will certainly lower the payment. It'll have an impact on districts who reach that circuit breaker for protection. So there's a number of knockoff effects, if you will, by remaining with average daily attendance versus going to the enrollment number.
Any other questions, Mr. Fletcher? Go ahead, Trustee Turner.
Any color on maybe a clawback of that 5% governor's holdback from last year? I know that was a topic of discussion that was still on the table.
Yeah, in fact, we fully anticipate that's actually going to happen. And the mechanics of that, just kind of giving you a top view of that, is the 5% holdback will actually, that'll be paid out. But how they're going to facilitate that is they're going to reduce the funding through a line item in the foundation formula that's called the discretionary line item. And they're going to take those dollars and then route them back through the foundation formula through the traditional salary-based apportionment, career ladders, frequently the term that you use here or that you'll hear used by the state or by the governor or legislators. And so there's actually a line item for the career ladder for teachers, for administrators, and for classified. And so the reductions associated with those particular line items will be reimbursed and returned to what the statute defines them to be paid at. However, they're going to facilitate that funding by reducing the discretionary line item. So as much as I'd like to say that we're losing $1 and gaining $1, theoretically that's the case, but it's really a different mechanism and a different formula that is used. So some districts will lose $1 and gain $1. Other districts will lose $1 and gain $1.10. Other districts will lose $1 and gain 85 cents. So essentially, it's sort of a ballpark number that what we're losing is what we'll get. Now, the state is arguing that it really is kind of a hold harmless because the funding that is just, we talked about that's coming through the most recent tranche of COVID dollars, and for this district is about $935,000. Can be used to backfill the discretionary funding that's being cut. The argument that we are making as business managers is, yes, that could be true if the federal funds and the federal funds group down at the state interpret our use that would be in compliance with the 15 parameters that were defined for those dollars. COVID dollars have traditionally been earmarked and devoted towards COVID-related uses. So you think of masks and plexiglass and disinfectant, things of that nature. But they frankly have given us so much of that A, we don't need that. And B, when they cut discretionary, we're cutting things like supplies and we use those dollars for supplies and utilities and employee benefits that aren't paid for through the state's foundation formula. So it isn't necessarily a fair trade, at least is the way that we read the information today. So we've asked for more guidance in regards to a definitive nature on how we can use those funds, because there are one or two of the line items that are newly added to these dollars that are shall we say, very interpretive. And you can interpret them to be very broad in their use. And if that's going to be the case, we'd like to make sure that we have coverage from the state, that we don't spend those dollars for that purpose and then find that we're denied as a result of it. So it's a little messy right now, but we do fully anticipate that the legislature will push through the funding by virtue of that 5% in the way that it is traditionally paid. And they'll fund that by a deduction in that discretionary line item. And the expectation is that we'll be given parameters on defining exactly how we can use those CARES Act dollars or those COVID dollars. And for us, we're losing about $1 million, but we have about 935 from those COVID relief dollars. So it's not exactly a dollar for dollar, but you know, it's a close ballpark.
All right, any further questions? I'll entertain a motion then that we approve the monthly financial reports and payment of bills, subject to any supplementation that Mr. Fletcher may come up with later on.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Did you, Trustee Larned? Okay. Hearing none, then I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, the ayes have it. That motion carries. The next matter is the consideration of personnel entering and exiting. You want to take us through that, Superintendent Peters?
Yeah, I would defer to Brooke. She's ready
Oh,
for the
all right.
report.
Certainly.
Good
Excuse me, Brooke.
evening. Oh, no worries. Trustees, you have a personnel request that considers certified and classified exiting and entering. It appears that for the early notification incentive, we have had some movement in both the certified and classified staff. So we have a number of individuals who will be retiring at the end of this year. No certified staff recommended for hire at this point in time. We'll be gearing up for that shortly. Administrative staff, I would just like to take a moment to suggest that you may want to deny Mr. Fletcher's exiting request on the personnel report that you have before you. And I do also want to say that although I've only had a little over a year of time to work with Brian, I am surely going to miss him. Every day I wake up and think, oh my goodness, this is one less day. So I'll leave it at that before I get too emotional. Brian, you know that we know where to find you. In addition, we have several classified staff that are also going to be retiring. And then we did just recently hire a bus driver. So that's positive news, full-time addition to the transportation staff. We also have two paraprofessionals that were hired at the middle school as a result of the board's direction to allow for the hiring of mid-year staff to help with intervention services. And coaching staff, we have a couple who are exiting and a couple who are entering and recommended for hire. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I do, Brooke, if I could. Under the certified staff, you mentioned that these were announcements of retirement that were probably the result of our incentive. Is that correct?
Certainly something that probably assisted in terms of we put the first deadline at February 15th for certified and classified staff to provide us with early notification of retirement. And we have seen several in the last several days. We anticipate there might be a few more just based on some of the questions we've been receiving and fielding in HR.
Great. Any questions? All right. Hearing none, then I will entertain a motion to approve the personnel request of the Board of Trustees as set forth in the memo from our HR Director, Brooke Marshall.
So moved.
Second.
I have a second. Oh, you do. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve the report on personnel signify by saying aye.
I,
Those opposed, the ayes have it. Motion carries, and that report is approved. The next matter is the certification of emergency closure, and that is an action item. Superintendent Peters, do you want to take us through that, or is that within the clerk's realm?
No, that's a pretty simple thing. It's just the certification of our call to close school on the rather large snowstorm on that Thursday. So it's just a formal report we have to send to the state. And it was for a snow day.
It made me a little bit nostalgic to think about back in the days when the only thing that closes schools was a snowstorm. Those were the days, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Any questions about this report? Yes, go ahead, Trustee Turner.
None about this report specifically. I understand it's an administrative procedure, but I would look forward to a discussion about the policy of closing school on snow days at some point in the future. In the age of technology and cameras and Chromebooks and down so many learning days, I would hope we could revisit that policy in the proper forum at a time in the future.
All right. Any other comments then?
I agree just with Dan. I would open that question. Welcome that conversation.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure we get to that. So any further questions or discussions of the certification of the emergency closure? And this is something that has to be reported to the state. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the certification as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the questions. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I,
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it. Motion carries, and that certification is approved. Now we move to the information agenda. And the first item is a report from the superintendent, an update on the board reorganization plan, and an update on the implementation of our modified Plan A, which began yesterday. The floor is yours, Superintendent Peters.
Thank you, Trustee Rourke. The schools have had a solid couple of days. I've been checking in with them on a regular basis on both days. We've had very few staff absences with good coverage overall. A couple of absences here and there that are just normal. So staff attendance has been excellent in the elementaries, and I'm just mostly speaking about the elementaries here. Some of the schools got a little bit better the second day than the first with fewer absences. And there were some tardies, obviously, on that first Monday. Things were just going back to normal. But in general, I had a report of no problems at all. And actually, the adverse of problems was just a lot of really good vibes from many of the kids, really happy to get back. And the staff saying it was really nice to see all the kids get back. And so some real positives from principals and secretaries. So nothing major to report other than we're off to a very short but good start in these first couple of days, and hopefully that maintains all through this week. And then as we consider any other kind of change to the secondary level, we can really see if we have any problems at all coming with this increase in in-person learning. So far so good, but again, it's a very short 2-day report. And absences are real solid overall in their normal percentages. A lot of kids just with normal sicknesses that are going home with just tummy aches and things like that, but nothing major, nothing out of the ordinary from a traditional year. So in general, good solid report on the first 2 days of increased in-person learning.
Fritz, if I could, does it appear that most of the elementary school students have in fact returned to the buildings?
Yes, very much so. The attendance is really solid. And overall very good. One of the things that I did do was I visited a number of schools as they were preparing for this And I got to sit in at a building leadership team meeting at a couple of the schools. And I was really impressed with the sense of cooperation and work. The teachers really just willing to step up and fill in any gaps that they saw in their planning to return, and making sure that the students had a good rotation through their specials and their art and library and things like that. And so I saw a lot of teachers working very diligently and cooperatively to make sure that they were ready to go on the following Monday. So overall, real solid. Any questions on that part?
Anyone? Yes, go ahead, Trustee Turner.
On the bus side, any friction on the bus routing? I mean, that seemed like that was a big piece of this that needed some planning.
They have reported no problems at all. So picking up kids, the kids have been at their sites. We had no reports of any missed routes or anything like that. So nothing from transportation.
Trustee Stone.
And I think you said food lunch service was another thing that could be, take some planning in order to ramp up. That went okay?
Yep, no problems at all for the food.
Other questions? All right, that being the case, Superintendent Peters, if you will move then to an update on the administrative reorganization plan.
Sure. I want to take you back to the December board meeting when you passed resolution 2020-4. And some of the key aspects of this resolution were to, the board desires to reduce the cost of administration, consider reorganization of the district administrative office, and increase the efficiency and effectiveness of district administration. Our committee has been meeting and talking about this. We've met 3 times and we've discussed some of those possibilities. With you and on our report here, we have a document that is there, and it's a reorganization proposal. So first off, we would be starting with an organizational tree at the district office that is different than what we currently have. Our proposal is that we have the superintendent hiring, obviously, that's been taken care of, but that we move to an assistant superintendent position that would chiefly be a chief academic officer, focused primarily on curriculum and professional development. And then they would also oversee, that assistant superintendent would oversee the director of special programs, which is traditional because that is more of an academic position, overseeing all the federal programs, special ed, monies for language learners, et cetera, and all the title monies. And then on the other side, the superintendent would be in charge of the HR director, the finance director, the principals, and the technology director. I wanted to make sure I got that technology box in there. One of the things that I want you all to consider in this is that this would be potentially quite a bit of savings. I will be discussing with you the exact dollar amount of those savings, but it is along with the decisions you made earlier in this year around July in changing our communications program, that we are looking at savings that are pretty substantial in the range of around 400,000. So that is quite a bit of savings in one building. And those are personnel and benefit costs overall. One of the things that has been key here is that for the past few years, without an assistant superintendent in the district for a few years, we have not really had a backup to the superintendent that is primarily working closely with the superintendent or in this building. So I have served along with Rob Ditch, because we both have that EDS, that superintendent certification. We've served as a superintendent designee. And so when the superintendent is gone for a week at a time, let's say, or if they're out of the district for a period of time on vacation, or if they're out of the valley for a specific meeting, then the work of the superintendent, if there was an emergency situation, would fall on a principal of a school or even a vice principal of a school. So one of my considerations in looking at this and working with the group is that an assistant superintendent is a built-in designee that's always available, and you have, in a sense, a leadership position at the district office that's ready to step in if something were to happen to the superintendent. Just this week, I had a little meeting with the mountain, so to speak, and had a nice little crash on Baldy. And it just takes one moment of time for the superintendent to be unavailable. So it is really critical in my mind that we have that high level leadership capacity immediately if the superintendent is not available. So that's just one reason I think that the assistant superintendent position is worthwhile. While some people in the community may be looking at it as like you're bringing back another, very expensive administrator, in the long run, and as we look at the administrative salary schedule, which we will have to change and redo, that's on my list to work with you folks on. This is quite a savings, and hopefully it will also be something that brings in some more efficiency and effectiveness in terms of you'll have a very tight leadership tree and a organizational tree that's really clear and concise. And then the work can progress from that. And I do want to say that if we are allowed to open up this type of position or shift to this type of organizational model, then we would want to make sure that our brand new superintendent hire, Jim Foudy, would be a very high level participant in the hiring of this person. I think it's critical that our new superintendent would be very active in the hiring of this position, and would have a big say in the person that they would hire, because I think it's critical that the new superintendent has the ability to build that team of people around this position, around the superintendent's position as they develop their core district office team. So that would also be the case, hopefully, with the finance director, as we have advertised that position. And having Mr. Foudy involved in that position as well. Very, very key leadership positions in the district. So I think the financial savings are substantial in this potential of this proposal. And then I think it also offers a much better backup system for the district in case anything were to happen to the assistant superintendent, to the superintendent, and just have a better leadership tree in a sense, or organizational tree at the district office as a whole. So in speaking with our group, we really thought that was the best remedy to meet the dual guidelines of saving money and creating a very efficient process. So we recommend that you folks discuss this, and we discuss this in an executive session potentially and in the further meetings, and then hopefully we could move forward with this proposal.
If I could, Fritz, as you know, and as we stated, I think clearly in our resolution, we are interested in reducing administrative expense. And I can almost hear a few screams out there. It appears from the way you presented the report that we're actually adding administrative personnel. My understanding is that is not the case, that we are consolidating, which is another way of saying eliminating a position or some positions. I wonder if you could speak to that.
Yeah, we would be compressing some of the departments here at the district office and be hiring one person where we've had three. So that's with all the benefits and everything else. This would take a very careful look at duties under each one of those jobs. And I do want to make sure that the new superintendent is also involved once we move into this, and actually defining the exact duties of the job. In speaking with Mr. Foudy, if we do go this route, he does want that position to be primarily focused on being the chief academic officer. So it is a compression of personnel. And in doing that, we're saving quite a bit of money, along with the earlier compression of the communications department. You're looking at a savings of around $400,000, and that's a conservative estimate. So it just depends on where people are hired and how much they come in, what their salary would be. That also depends on the administrative salary schedule and how we work that out. But both with the administrative salary schedule work and this work, you are well on your way in terms of that goal of that resolution. In my mind, you are going to see quite a bit of savings, and that's quite a bit of savings with very few people. So in a district office alone, that's that would be close to 4 to 5 teachers in a year that you're saving. So that helps us as a whole district not have to RIF staff or reduction in force and things like that. So it really helps us balance our budget in the long run by protecting the school sites and reorganizing and creating a more efficient process here at the district office.
One other question I have before I open it up to the other trustees. We eliminated the communications department last year. So that was actually a savings that we achieved for this year. And the report that we have received thus far is for fiscal or school year 2021 to 2022. When you say it's a savings of $400,000, are you including in that the elimination last year of the communications department?
Yeah, that would be an annual savings of around $400,000 going forward. So the original changes that you made back in the summer with communications and the offset of hiring an outside firm, that is close to $200,000. And then this would be an additional $200,000. And I'm using very, very round numbers because you can literally get down into the very small numbers. It would all depend on when we hire people and what they come in at. But with our administrative salary schedule, and we're looking at just like on our salary schedule for faculty, we would be creating kind of an entry-level bar. So people can come in with experience, but they would be coming in with experience to a certain level. So we have a very good idea of what that maximum pay would be. So we're giving you an estimate of savings, and we'll be discussing that in our next meeting of the most amount of savings and the least amount of savings that we would have, meaning that salary span or breadth of that salary would be the smallest number we would pay them or the maximum number we would pay them. But either way, it still comes out to at least a minimum of about $200,000 additional dollars. So I think a close to $400,000, if not more, savings from just one building, and a very small building at that, is substantial.
If just to wrap up my part of this, the position has not been approved. The vice principal position, or excuse me, the assistant superintendent. That is something that the committee is recommending. Are we going to be provided with a written report? I know we do have these figures in front of us right now, but are you going to give us a written report that outlines the changes that are being suggested and that can be at some point released for public consumption?
Yes.
All right, Trustee Stone.
Brooke sent us something about a compensation and classification study, and I wondered if she could maybe talk to that a little bit and what that would provide us with and why.
Hi there. Sorry about that. Absolutely. So in terms of a classification and compensation study, I've been involved in a prior organization with them. Recently spoke just to get some information on what it would look like for the school district to potentially pursue that type of study. Essentially, a classification and compensation study really looks at job bands, job classifications, so whether it's classified, certified, or administrative, and then seeks to find out the economic demographics of not only our area, our valley, our school district, and then comparator districts, but also looks at things like a consumer price index for our region, and puts all of the variables together to determine kind of a low, medium, and high in terms of a percentile on the salary schedule. So it really helps base information on how you are paying individuals for the different jobs that they are performing. It bases it on actual demographic and economic data. So as an example, when someone says to me, you know, your administrative salary schedule is really high, it seems as if administrators are being paid, you know, a high salary, instead of where we are, I think right now, which is we don't have enough data to be able to really respond in a thoughtful and data-driven manner. This type of study provides information that looks at all of those factors like cost of living in the Valley compared to other areas, other districts. Things like that I think provide a more realistic approach in terms of responding to that type of question or comment. It can be done for both for all of the salary schedules, so classified, certified, and administrative. I would recommend that as an organization, if we wanted to participate in this type of study, that we would look at each of those. It could be something that is conducted in a phased manner. So if you say wanted to look at the administrative salary schedule first, that is something that is entirely possible. I've seen that phased approach and actually have just spoken to a company that performs our third-party benefits administrator, and they actually have branches of individuals that conduct this type of study. And in fact, the folks that I talked to recently have current studies with the city of Nampa and also the city of Meridian, and prior experience with school districts as well.
And so the study would be done by a private contractor, is that correct?
Correct. There are other individuals or other agencies that perform this type of study. There's a whole host of them. So it would really be up to the board in terms of whether you wanted to look at an RFP or an RFQ process, or look into what the costs are comparatively based on the organization and the scope of the project.
If I put this on the agenda for approval next Tuesday at the special meeting, is that enough time for you to put a proposal together?
I can certainly put together a preliminary proposal, and I will have information coming at least from our third-party administrator with a proposal that would give us a range in terms of costs for the board to at least consider. And then at that point in time, if it was something that the board would like to consider, then we could go from there. My dogs are definitely on high alert right now. Your mic's off.
Keith, your mic is off.
Keith, your mic's off.
I'm very much in favor of doing this, but as you know, we've got negotiations coming up. We're still looking at the administration, so without rushing things, I guess I'd like to rush things.
I can absolutely. Oh,
I like the fact that this company that you've talked to is already doing a study in Meridian and Nampa, so they're familiar with Idaho, and that seems like a good place to start.
Yes, Trustee Gorham, go ahead.
Brooke, I was wondering if you had any idea of how long, for example, once we hire the said corporation, how long it would take to get some preliminary data from them, since we are coming up on that time of year?
yeah. So I think it really depends on whether the board wants to do a phased in approach. So just taking, one salary schedule and looking at that first, and then looking at others later. Obviously, you have the factor of the certified salary schedule is also governed by, state statutes and also negotiations and the master agreement. So that's a factor to look at. But what I can do is I can give a call to the folks that I talked to and just kind of ask them what an outside time frame would be. And then within that, what it looks like if we just took, if we just bit off one portion of that to look at first. I can absolutely get that information probably by the end of tomorrow.
That'd be just great to have in the report on the 15th. So thanks.
Yes, Trustee Turner.
I seem to recall, maybe it was in the FAQs that were issued around the 09 levy, a discussion of comparative salaries in areas. Maybe Brian could illuminate me a little bit on this. Was this done in-house? Have we ever had a contractor to undergo a project like this? Or because it seems to me there have been some numbers around, but I sense they might have been generated in-house.
As I recall that was an in-house work that was done between the business manager at the time and the HR department. If it's the same report that I'm thinking that you're referencing.
Yeah, no, I think outstanding. We'd have a third party come in here and do this kind of work for us. That would give us some excellent data. Thank you.
Yes, Trustee Stone.
I have a different question for Brooke about the org chart and the way that it's set up. It looks like there are a lot of people reporting to the superintendent. And I know that just generally best practices, you don't want to have anybody responsible for have too many people reporting to them. And I wondered if you have any thoughts about that. I definitely don't know who it makes sense to report. I understand why special programs make sense to report to the assistant superintendent. We don't have a lot of choice, I don't think, but anyway, just curious what kind of best practices.
I think that with the incorporation, if the board moves forward on wanting to incorporate 360-degree evaluations for the principals, I think that's a really significant time save in terms of allowing for the superintendent to really hear from the day-to-day individuals that a principal interacts with, rather than just relying on the meetings that we have at a leadership level, that type of thing. I think that would also provide some time savings. I think that the proposal does include that the finance director position would continue to oversee transportation as well as, I think, food services, if I'm not mistaken. Superintendent Peters, I think that's correct. I think some of the duties that are folded into this proposal as it stands would take some of the kind of the pressure off of the superintendent. And I think having that assistant superintendent position is really important just in terms of what it encompasses and what it could help do in terms of acting as that, second in command for a superintendent. I think it really will matter, or will really depend, just in terms of getting those 360s in place, because I think that will be a significant time savings for a superintendent to get, meaningful feedback for evaluations for all of the certified administrators they oversee. Fritz, do you have anything else that?
Yeah, it really is. I'm looking at the chart and it would really be 12 people. So you'd have the assistant superintendent, HR, finance, technology, and then the 8 principals. So I really don't see that as being an overwhelming number, because oftentimes in education, school leaders will have over 45 people to supervise and evaluate. So I really see it as a very manageable number overall. The finance director would have also maintenance, transportation, and food service. So there is, and then under each one of these boxes, like HR has a number of, 2 people under their direction. Technology has quite a few under theirs. And then the finance director would have also the finance employees, which would be, a handful of employees. So there really is kind of a org chart here that I don't think puts any undue pressure on a superintendent. Oftentimes superintendents will have upwards of 5 and 6 assistant superintendents alone, plus some of their own administrative staff that they work with specifically in the building, plus curriculum directors and, things like that. So I really think it's a pretty manageable number, and 12 does not, shake me or like worry me at all in terms of that kind of org chart.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
Trustee Turner.
Just judging by the excellent experience we've had with our contract with the Donovan Group, where in this chart would you possibly see room for other contracted services where we would start to enjoy the benefit of the network effect, where we're bringing in contractors that could help us in different aspects of administration? Where would you see that role play out?
We've looked into a couple of other areas and found that there wasn't, like we already contract our food services. We have looked at a couple of other options, but we just didn't see a savings at all. I reported one of them back to Laura. She made the request some time ago. But just really, I don't see a whole lot now, but that could be something that we look at in terms of, I really like to, as we're doing our work in the organization committee, I'd really like to look at things like limiting cell phones and things like that. So it could help us to lessen the workload of some of our directors. But really, I don't think there's a whole lot of other options. And part of that is the remote nature of our location. And the other part of that is just simply, some contracted services work really well online, other ones don't. Other ones you actually have to be here. So I don't think there's a whole lot of option, because you could look at things like, I was in a district that outsourced all their maintenance, and they outsourced all their custodial. I've been in districts where they outsource their transportation. I've been in districts where they outsource, their food as well. And some of those work really well. Some of them don't work at all. But we have looked at some of those options, and we looked at options for some of our subcategories here. And our location is part of the problem. And then part of the problem too is that when you have a contracted service, if they're at an administrative level, sometimes it works really well, but when they're at the actual worker level, sometimes you can see some problems with that, because there's not as much dedication to the site, and there's a turnover of staff in tremendous numbers, because they're bringing in staff that have to drive up here and things like that instead of actually living here. So we have looked at some of that. We can always explore more, but I don't see a whole lot of other contracted service options in our current setup.
I was kind of thinking in the realm of data assessment, bringing in, contracting with data science firms to look at our numbers, perhaps even contracting certain network administration functions. Again, we've had such an excellent experience with the Donovan Group, and I think, in a world where we're seeing more dispersed workflows, we owe it to look at every process and see how we can most efficiently execute and save resources in a finite resource environment.
I think some of it.
Don't go ahead.
Sorry, I think some of it, the idea is to save money, but I think other advantages that we're seeing with the Donovan Group is the ability to have access to people that have a lot broader experience that they can bring in, and how does that, how can we learn from that as well? So I think there are a couple possibilities. There can be disadvantages like you're describing too, so you'd have to assess it pretty carefully. But
all right, any further questions of Superintendent Peters? All right, we thank you for those reports, and Brooke, if you can perhaps get in touch with me later in the week, and we'll see if we can get something on the agenda for next week in regard to the compensation schedule.
Will do.
All right, the next item on the information agenda is the chairman's report. The only thing I have to report is that we are going to take up at our special meeting 1 week from tonight the question of whether or not to bring the secondary schools, the middle schools and the high school, into modified Plan A. And at that point, I think we've already made some arrangements, but we need to have our high school, middle school principals, certainly the Carey principal, available. And I would hope, Fritz, we have an opportunity to get a sampling of opinion from our high school and middle school teachers. So all of you out there who are wondering when we are going to have all school children in school, that matter will be taken up and discussed, and we'll put it on the information and action agenda so that if we feel confident in doing so, we can set a date. Any questions about that? Any suggestions? All right, that's the chairman's report. And the next matter is the software effectiveness report. What I'm going to do, because I don't know how long that might last, I'm going to call a 5-minute recess right now. We'll come back, or you will come back at 6:56, and I will bow out at this point. So we'll see you all back here, other than myself, at 6:56.
Dan, are you there? Hi, everybody. I'd like to welcome everyone back from our 5-minute recess. And the next item on the information agenda is the software effectiveness report. The board is looking to increase efficiencies and streamline departments as much as we can, as we've been talking about. We asked for a report on software, its effectiveness, cost, and how difficult it is to support. Angie and Teresa, you two put together a report for us. Can you give us a background on it, talk about it a bit?
Yes, certainly. Teresa and I welcome the opportunity to join you this evening to answer any questions you have about this report. The report does address your request to have us break down the district purchased software licenses as part of the budget planning process. So we submitted the report in 3 parts. So you have the board memo, which speaks to the background information and for specific purchasing and licensing and the different types of licenses that we buy specific to the curriculum department versus the technology department. And then we provided the spreadsheet that has the data that you requested specific to the type, the purpose, the cost, the number of licenses, the grade levels it serves, the different schools that they serve, the renewal dates, the usage statement that we garnered from a variety of usage reports, the level of support required to maintain it. So that spreadsheet does have a lot of information in it specific to the questions that you had. And then the third piece of our report is the results from our effectiveness survey. So we sent out a survey to our teachers on the most widely used instructional software licensing and programs that they use. And you have their results in your possession now as that third piece. So just some key points I want to mention from the curriculum side of the software purchasing, and then Teresa will do the same from the technology, from their perspective, the technology department's perspective, and then we'll be available for questions. So I have 4 things that I'd like to mention or draw your attention to. The first is overall spending from the curriculum department on the products that basically address the curriculum program, or so the educational program. We spend about on average about $134,000 a year on the annual subscriptions, specifically on products for intervention like Read 180, accommodations or accessibility software like word prediction software, our assessments that we administer digitally, such as our screening tools, the STAR and the ISIP, excuse me, and varied instructional support or supplemental resources. Around 50% of the budget that we use to purchase software from the curriculum department are on 2 products, iStation, which is our benchmark K-5 math and reading assessment tool that we use, and then it also provides an instructional platform to individualize the learning path of students based on how they score on the assessment. And so that provides a digital accessibility to lessons to help kids progress at the learning path that's unique to them. And then Renaissance Learning, which is our STAR assessment for 6 through 10 reading and math. And the popular accelerated reader, or also known as AR, if you've had kids in our school district, that monitors comprehension of students' independent reading. So that's where the majority of the curriculum software budget items, those expenses go. And then the last thing, we included the instructional materials, those core science, social studies, all of those adoptions on your list in the spreadsheet. Primarily because there's maintenance of those, right? Rostering and things like that. So we wanted to make sure that you understood that we have that licensing, but those items are actually purchased out of a different budget and in engaging in a different process. So It's the adoption process, and they're done on a 6-year cycle based on the subject. And so those are renewable every 6 years, and they come again through a different budget. That's why you don't see a cost associated with those in the spreadsheet. So those are kind of the 4 key points I want to bring to your attention from the curriculum side. And Teresa, what about you for the technology side of the software purchasing?
Thank you. We tried to include everything that would give you a comprehensive overview of the products that we cover in each of our budgets. You'll notice in the spreadsheet there are a number of products in the infrastructure category, and that there's a wide range of systems that are covered there. And for the most part, those are primarily in the technology budget of around $350,000 a year. There are a couple of specific products to the transportation department and the maintenance department, and those items would be included in their budget line items. We cover a lot of ground in the products the technology department supports. It includes everything from our student information system, learning management system, email, calendar, administrative programs such as those, as well as some infrastructure software and systems that support that for wireless, phone system, firewall, routers, switches, and network gear. So we wanted to give you the most comprehensive look that we could at all of these different components. I think probably the best way of looking at it is for you to ask me questions, because it can be quite a bit of information. I did want to say that I ranked the technology support difficulty based on how much time and effort is needed to maintain those products. And a lot of that has to do with the urgency of the requests. So examples of that would be Skyward covers so many administrative functions, and those are things that need immediate support. So we have one FTE who primarily spends most of his time with Skyward products. The same can be said of the Google Suite, including Google Classroom and the learning management systems. Those are critical for the operation of our schools. And so the urgency in having the tech support be just in time is very critical. So that increases the need for support in those areas. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, or at least I'll try to.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? Trustee Turner?
Yeah, I've got a few. I think the idea behind this was trying to get a handle on the process that goes into procuring these software licenses and renewing the licenses with the end goal of how do we optimize that process to drive the most efficiencies to make sure we're allocating our scarce resources in a way that's most cost efficient and plus delivers the best results. And so when I look at the initial report, you talk about how these licenses are reviewed and renewed, and you say the directors look at this each winter and then decide to review or renew them. And I was hoping to get some insight into that into that process there. I mean, is there a quantitative measurements that you undergo every year to see what bang for the buck we're getting in each of these licenses? I mean, is it do you prioritize licenses on a metrics that say how does it enhance student outcomes? Does it meet a prioritized need? Does it overlap with something else? So just kind of enlighten us to the process of how you assess software each year and the license, and whether we're to renew or take on a new product or how that all goes.
And I think it'd be helpful to hear from both Angie and Teresa on this, because I think I know that curriculum has a certain process and it sounds like it's different for IT. So if you could each speak to that, that'd be great. Teresa, do you want to start?
Okay. Well, a lot of the things we've had in place for quite some time. So it's not always a process of evaluating a comparative product as much as trying to negotiate the best price possible. So this would be something we'd look at with, let's say, Skyward as an example. That has historically been a 3 to 5% increase in cost every year. So I engage in discussion with the vendor to try to keep that cost as low as possible. We're really trying to manage the increase in cost more than anything else. So what we've done with Skyward is we've entered into 3-year agreements that keep the price at the time the contract is signed. So at least we know that there won't be a substantial increase over those 3 years. One thing that we're looking at this round, this renewal season, is our Microsoft license. So historically, we've had a lot of Windows systems and we used Microsoft Office throughout the district for many, many years. Then with Google coming on the scene, probably about 10 years ago now, some of that has shifted and we're looking hard at how many licenses do we need to maintain for Microsoft Office. We still have career and technical education use of that. Secondary students can get certifications in Microsoft and Adobe products. So it's something that crosses over. It's both in the curriculum and IT areas. But at the same time, I think we can find some savings there by reducing the number of licenses. And it all depends on the way the company handles the licensing as well. So one thing that's happened in the IT world over time, years ago, we would purchase a software product and we owned it. And then you just paid a minimal yearly fee for the maintenance. And that's completely changed now with the cloud-based systems. Most of your software companies are looking at an annual subscription basis. So we're seeing pressure from at least 2 of our vendors that we've worked with to go away from the software licensed purchase to an annual subscription basis. It's just a revenue stream for them. So I understand the reason why. But that's somewhat, I guess, gives you a little bit of what I go through to look at the different products and see. We do also get feedback as we can from all of the different end users that will let us know what the priority is for the systems they use.
All right,
Hope that helps.
so
Superintendent Peters, you want to make a quick comment?
Yeah, I just want to mention before Angie jumps in that when we're looking at any kind of software change, as a principal for so many years, oftentimes they would bring us the potential of a software change. A really good story is when we switched from Novell and we went into Google. So like it was a transformation of basically all of our email and our calendar and everything. And it was a huge infrastructure change for the entire staff, all 500 and some employees. And that's critical that that's a part of this discussion always. So just to say like, hey, yeah, we'd like to move from this software to the next, we can't stop and think that we don't have to train staff and spend a good amount of time doing it. So I can say that that was one of the best software transfers that we've ever had. We also had the shift from SASE to Skyward years and years ago, and that one took a while because so we've been with Skyward for some time, but to do a big change like a software like a student management system shifting from something like Skyward to, let's say, PowerSchool or another big vendor would be a huge culture change. So that no matter what we do, if we want to change software packages, we have to think of every single end user, like Teresa just said, and it can be a huge professional development task to change even just minimal packages of software.
There's a real friction to that. Trustee Turner?
Yeah, I certainly understand the legacy issues, but I don't think you quite addressed my question about optimization. You said, you know, many of these systems we've had for a long time. What is the ongoing process to make sure we're optimizing this what $400,000 spend on infrastructure? I mean, how do we know we've got the most efficient stuff out there if we're just, you know, renewing the license that we've had before? I mean, how do you balance the legacy aspects versus, you know, the newer applications that are coming into the marketplace?
Well, we do look at the new systems that are out there. I try to keep abreast of the changes in the market. We do speak with a lot of other school districts and see what other folks are doing, and try to follow suit if that meets our needs as well. I'm not real clear on what you mean by optimization, so I'm struggling a little bit with that. We have had some not everything in our system has stayed the same for years and years. We've had multiple different internet filtering solutions, for example. So we do look at each system specifically and compare to what other products are out there and what it would take to make a change. We're in that process right now with possibly reviewing our website provider and see what other options would be available to us.
Are there any further questions for Teresa before we switch over to Angie? Okay, Angie.
Okay, so the end users of the products that I primarily am responsible for are our students, and they are specific to meeting specific needs of those students, most of those products. I agree, it's difficult to stay current. I get emails on a daily basis of new products coming out. It really is a balancing act to stay focused on what's best without just bringing in the new product, without, you know, first field testing it, like, you know, really piloting it to see if we get what we want out of the product. You know, whether or not it's worth the additional professional development, because with every new tool that we get, the teachers need to learn how to use it as well as the students. And so we have to really manage quantity with quality. That's why the schools they do some of their own licensing of products specific to schools and what they might want. And individual teachers are constantly wanting to try new products and taking advantage of free trials, and then, you know, approaching me about, hey, maybe the district needs this. So just understanding kind of what primarily is purchased from this budget, coming a lot from recommendations of program teachers from special programs. I look at usage reports. I circle back to the teachers annually. I'll give you some examples. Right now, we're piloting Who's Reading for grades 6 through 8 at our middle school and up at Hemingway's Middle School. As a possible replacement to Accelerated Reader. We've had the Accelerated Reader product for quite some time. Every year I ask the librarians and the teachers and the principals, do you still want AR? It looks like you're still using it, but we don't want a product to be purchased that it's not being used. And so, you know, some potential savings might be coming from reducing the number of AR licensing at a higher cost with Who's Reading licenses at a lower cost. We purchased a learning.com is what it's called. It's a keyboarding software. We were very excited about that as our keyboarding curriculum resource as instructional technology specialists in the elementary schools. And we've had some potential issues with it this year. And so we're looking at piloting a typing club, which if that's something that we want to evolve to, would also benefit us from a cost savings perspective. And again, trying just to make sure we have the right tool that will gather the data that we need and honor the curriculum and the standards that we're trying to teach our students. Another quick example, I get approached a lot. So like the high school approached me last spring about IXL licenses for a math class with high numbers of English learners, feeling that that was going to be a product that could work for them. We evaluated it, we looked into it, and we brought it on board. As I'm starting to circle back now with the budgeting process, I noticed that we have not been maximizing the potential of that product, and they have decided that yes, that would be something that we could strike off of the purchase this year. So those are just some examples of how I network with each of the teacher users to see if the impact on students is still of a value for where we want to have a continued commitment. I have dropped products over the years. The first one I dropped was a huge expense to the district. It was Success Maker. We just were not using it. Brain Pop, I think, is another one. And if there's some listeners out there, I know some teachers would say, please bring it back, but we just did not have wide usage across the district for that product, even though we have pockets of interest from different teachers in different schools. So hopefully that explains how those decisions are made. And again, they're primarily to support the academic program across our schools and to meet individual student needs.
Trustee Gorham.
I have a question regarding licensing in some of these programs. Like I think I recall that you said that iReady is a big expense to the district in programming. And I didn't know if that's an annual thing, or it just seems like, I'm just briefly looking at these numbers, and I know surveys are not very reliable, but 63% somewhat like it, 63% somewhat like it or less. And I just didn't know if that was something that was being looked at again, since it seems to be such a big, obviously it's a lot of users, and that's just a sampling. 80 people responded, but is that something that is an annual thing that's looked over, or is it like a 3-year contract, or is it something we have bought?
Okay, so I think you're referring to iStation. iReady is specific to our math program, Ready Math, and it provides licenses to students primarily in our special ed program as a tool that can be used, again, for an individualized learning pathway for those students in need of intervention. But iStation, yes, it is a product that we do not have wide daily use across the district. We have some schools that are very engaged in it and others not. And that is actually, it's on my list as an area to circle back on. If we were to take something like that away from a district level, you'd want to replace it with something. And so, yeah, just making sure that we don't create any gaps. So it is one tool that different teachers at different levels of usability provide the resource that they need for specific students.
Well, I just have to say, I appreciate you both explaining this, because I'm basically the general public, and I very much appreciate being broken down tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Gorman.
Trustee Turner.
Yeah. Again, to have this list of software and have the ability to go in and research what each of these things do, you got some pretty cool stuff out there that these kids can access, and that's great. There's such a suite of these. iStation, as I was understanding it, a big part of it was the backbone to our testing protocol, the ISIP, isn't it? So is the education piece just a module that's added on to that testing piece?
Yes, you can buy the learning platform separately.
Okay.
And so we looked at the costs, and we looked at the recommendations of the state, actually. And then we made a decision that if that is the assessment tool that the state is using for the IRI for K3, that if we did not afford that opportunity for our kids to engage in that software itself, that we might be giving not being on a comparative level as other districts who provide that instructional platform, where the kids would be engaging in it at a higher rate and then be tested within it. So we and the DLT, so the principals helped make that decision about should we go ahead and purchase a learning platform to accommodate, so that would provide some individualized pathway for those kids based on how they test on the ISIP. And then, just because it's a digitally administered assessment, how the kids respond and engage with it could have, there could be benefits if the kids are actually in the platform itself on a regular basis to when they actually take the assessment, because they're practicing the same kinds of skills the way that the test asks them. Mm-hmm. So yes, we did make that decision, and we have been monitoring it, and that could be a product, Trustee Gorman, that we would specifically come back to look more deeply at.
Yes, Trustee Turner?
I hate to be monopolizing all these questions, but it's you put spreadsheets like that in front of a guy like me, and it's all kinds of things start happening, and they're all good. There's a whole bucket of software that's out there that you allude to in the report, but we don't specifically address here, and that's the licensing and of software that comes up through the buildings, through the teachers and so forth. And I would just like to get some sort of color on that process, because it would seem to me, we've got this awesome tech support group in Teresa's portion of the district there that are called on to support all these things as we bring them online. So when a request comes up, bubbles up through the building site, I mean, how do we evaluate that as being mission critical, whether it's redundant to something we have already? Is it going to require a significant amount of support resources? So how do we evaluate the additional expenditures that support has on each program? I know we know what all these licenses cost, but there's that other component. It's the toll it takes on our support folks. So when software kind of bubbles up through the from the building sites and through the teachers and lands in the lap of tech support, how do we rationalize that process to make sure we're really allocating our resources in the best way?
Well, that is an excellent question. I would like to defer to Fritz on this to talk about the building process a little bit, because there have been some software titles that have specifically at Wood River Middle School that they wanted to continue once the district license wasn't available. So maybe he could shed some light on what the buildings go through to make those determinations.
Yeah, so there's really some situations like even with Read 180, where Read 180 was initially a district bought software program for students that were coming to our school that were multiple years behind in their reading. And then there was another system called System 44 that was more on the phonics end of it, of just really learning how to read, even at the middle school level. So one of the things that would happen is over time, as the support for that product dwindled a little bit, that became about a $2,000 to $2,500 costs from the school site itself to maintain all the materials that were used every year. So in the actual classes of Read 180, you had to supply all the workbooks and the other materials. So it shifts over to the school over time, and then we also see an effect of some of the kids being in a learning program where they're in the same learning program year after year after year after year. So one of the things that eventually happened is the high school went away from it because it just continued where kids were still taking Read 180 classes, because while some kids will make tremendous gains in it, the bar is constantly moving. So as the kids are learning how to read and they're improving, the bar just keeps jumping up. So it's really trying to maintain, and there's been many success stories with it. But at the same time, there's other kids that are just so far behind, they are still recommended for some type of intervention because they're still, well behind where they should be. Another example is BrainPop is another example that was mentioned. And this is a software program that the middle school still purchases. And that's about anywhere from $1,900 to $2,000 a year. And there was still a core group of teachers, especially at the younger ages in the middle school level, that wanted that software program. And the reason they liked it was because it had a automatic Spanish version as well. So they could be doing an assignment and then the Spanish version could be done as well. So it was a resource that certain teachers wanted to hang on to. So there's kind of this lobbying effort every year at the school site where teachers will be like, no, I really need this. It's a critical part. But we have to weigh that between how much we're paying versus how many people are using it. And even one teacher, if they're using it consistently with all 100 and some kids that they have during the year in a normal year, you can sometimes make that purchase because it's just, it's going to have an impact, and that teacher shows regular growth, that you don't want to upset that balance. So it's really a kind of a program or a process at each school where we have to look at the effectiveness and the widespread use or the limited use. And then there's just a point in time sometimes when I just don't have the money. I'm so sorry. And you have to cut those funds for that teacher. But invariably, I see, especially in the spring this last year, teachers are finding so many products online that they start using them. Here's the rub for that, for Teresa, is that a teacher will find something online, and then to actually make it work better, they want it paid for because they want to go to the pro level. And then they start needing an update in system requirements. So they need better hardware, and then they need tech to come in and install it and then make it work on their smart board. So it is a balancing act from the start to the finish, and exactly what Angie and Teresa are talking about. It is a constant balancing act of what the teacher at the classroom level wants, what the students need, what the costs are, and how many people are using it. And I tell you, it is really tough because there's so many products coming on an annual basis that teachers start using. It is also, however, the lifeblood of growth for many teachers professionally. I have seen more sharing and collaboration over the spring and the summer where teachers were able to help other teachers. So many stuff that's online that's just free. That's a whole nother gambit. But there again, we bring in Teresa sometimes to help them load that and things like that. So it is really hard to put a bullseye on any of this discussion because it's constantly changing. And education, I'd have to say, is one of the top industries where people are searching out that government money. So we get, like Angie said, I get on my email at least, 4 or 5 emails to even more a day of like, check this product out, look at this. So it's this constant barrage of ideas and new products that you have to kind of sift through. And it's really hard to keep up with the pace. It is a challenge, and it's an institutional challenge. And I think that in terms of saving money as a possibility with the software, I think we constantly do that. And one of our problems is that we're on a deadline that I believe is pretty much 90 days. So most big software programs that we buy, we have to really be looking at those in January, because if they are a fiscal year adoption where we're renewing them, we have to make that 3 months from July. So all the way well into April and March, we have to be making a final decision. So it's a tough pace because the springtime, the second semester in the school industry is super busy with hiring and so many other things.
I just wanted to comment and have another question for Teresa. Clearly, IT has been a critical department for the district, but this year has amplified that more than ever. And I know that we can't, as a district, necessarily pay normal IT wages for staff. So I just wondered, what do you see as the most important ways to attract and retain quality IT staff, since it is such a critical part of our district?
One of the main factors for our staff is being in an environment where our work makes a difference. We want to feel purpose in our jobs, and that is, we are able to feel that by understanding that what we're doing really directly impacts student learning and assists teachers. So there's a bit of a personal connection there that maybe you don't always get in other IT organizations, that really provides some job satisfaction. You're right, it is a very difficult place. We had a hard time recruiting a database person, as you recall, primarily due to the salary requirements. So that's an ongoing struggle for the district, I think, in recruitment into the future, especially now with how this COVID emergency has created all remote learning, remote working. People can live anywhere, and companies have realized that there's cost savings in that, and we're probably going to see fewer buildings and high-rise condos in downtown areas because people can move to Idaho and live here and do their work for major corporations. So we're feeling that. Also, I think that's why, to answer your question a little bit, Trustee Turner, in the tech department, we want to support every product. We want to support everyone that comes to us for help. And that can be a daunting task that feels overwhelming at times. So even if it's one or two teachers who use a product, that could be effective for their students. So we want to help with that. For the most part, what you would recommend in IT is for effectiveness and optimization would be to standardize, have fewer products, fewer types of systems hardware-wise. But we have always taken a stance in Blaine County schools is that we want to meet the needs of the individuals. And that is, requires more diversity overall. So I appreciate your discussion and consideration of that it does take staff time to support these things. And what we've noticed this year is now we want students to be using the online textbook, where in the past they had a textbook and they used it at school. So now we're providing access to those online resources that maybe we hadn't used before as much. So it is a place where I think there'll be a lot of changes in the industry, and hopefully we can put some more pressure on some of the publishers to make their products better and to be more effective for how we're using it, how we're using technology now.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Trustee Turner.
Last question, I promise. You just hit on the point of standardization, and I couldn't let this one go without a question about it. We're currently supporting 4 different learning management systems, from Seesaw to Google Classroom to Schoology, and then Lift kind of sticks out to me because I notice that we've got 59 users at the alternative school, yet we're paying over $4,000 for this management system. Big picture, wouldn't it be better if we were all on a standardized one standardized platform? Then as students matriculate through the system, they're not and their families are trying to keep up with everything. They're not looking at learning 4 different platforms as they move through this thing. I understand there's, again, legacy effects. People have adopted certain platforms because they like certain features to it. But big picture, what is the possibility we could get onto one platform for ease of support and possibly efficiencies?
Well, you see a big smile on my face because I've been advocating for this for a long, long time. But to defend the reason why we have 4 different learning management systems now, LIFT, for example, is critical to Silver Creek's program. And they've adopted that, and they feel very strongly that that is a key element to their success. So we can get Principal Glenn on, and he'll give you a much more rousing overview of that product, but he's convinced that it's critical for their program. We have Seesaw because that is better for the younger grades, for the primary grade levels. And that's something that we have been piloting this year, primarily because of the distance learning, the virtual learning needs with COVID. Schoology really was pushed by Wood River High School staff. This came from the instructional staff wanting to have a better platform for secondary students. So it seems like a great idea, and I, like I said, advocate for it every time I can to have one product. I do think it would be so much easier for families to navigate, but getting to that point will take a lot of work and discussion with a lot of people involved and some compromise. So people are going to have to give up something that they feel is very important to them right now. So if you have any suggestions for me on how to approach that, I am open.
Thank you.
Thank you for indulging all my questions. I've got more, but I'm not.
Anytime.
Take them off offline. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Teresa and Andy. Appreciate it. Okay, so we'll move now to the action agenda. The first item on the action agenda is the survey approval for Haley Elementary well location. Superintendent Peters, are we going to have Brian or Howie present that to us?
Yep, Brian's all ready to jump in.
Excellent. Hey, Brian.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much. Chairman and trustees, so in regards to the well, this is we're looking, let me just start over here. So a couple months ago, we being Howie and I and Superintendent Peters had requested that we could go out to via an informal bid and procure a company to assist us with the Haley Elementary irrigation well. We call it the well location, but really what we're doing is asking for the board to approve us to utilize a company called SPF, and they're SPF Water Engineering. They're really kind of the go-to folks for this type of work. And what they will do is essentially design the well, design the scope of work, help us identify the location on where the well will best be served and best perform. And then they'll assist us with the selection process and then the construction management of the pump installation or build out. And the total cost on that is $17,700. And just a reminder in regards to the well, this is I don't want to say the final step, but certainly one of the last steps associated with the agreement that this district made with the city of Haley in swapping the property that is out Croy Canyon Road for the well over there by the middle school and some associated water rights for that particular well, and then additional water rights over at the Haley location so that we could essentially replicate the installation over at the middle school at the Haley location. Currently, we're on the city water. Doesn't really make sense to use potable water when we could just drill our own well. We've discussed the savings, which are quite significant, roughly $50,000 per year over the given course of potentially infinity, assuming that Mother Nature continues to provide water for us. So the recommendation that comes along with this memo from administration is that the board would accept the proposal from SPF, which a copy was provided in the sum of $17,700. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Is there any questions for Brian? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the proposal from SPF Water for $17,700 for the scope of work that they provided.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. The motion again is to approve the proposal from SPF Water for $17,700 for these services. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have it, and the motion carries. The next item on the
Thank you.
agenda. Thank you, Brian. Next item on the agenda is the engineering at Wood River Middle School for the HVAC system. Brian, do you want to talk about that as well? Thank
You bet. Chairman, thank you so much. This is also a follow-up that in regards to previous requests that we had presented before the board. This request is for the Wood River Middle School HVAC retrofit. And this was actually a formal bid process that we issued and navigated through. So this took us a little longer to kind of go through that process and then return to the board. But essentially, the Wood River Middle School has a HVAC heating and air conditioning system that's 24 years old, and a general lifespan on those of about 25 years. It's still in pretty decent shape, which is good news because we anticipate that the work will not be able to begin this summer because the aspect of the contracted summer, I was going to say summer months, but really summer weeks is probably more applicable, that is available between the end of this school year and the beginning of the next one. Compromised, that time frame is also compromised by the fact that COVID has really damaged the procurement timeline in regards to receiving the equipment that would be necessary to undertake this project. So we don't anticipate this being a project that we would undertake actually on site for this year. It'd be something that we would implement the following year, and depending on what the time frame is that would be allowable, it might actually even be a second year. But our conversations at this particular point in time is to try and complete that install next year. So more to come in regards to that aspect. But in regards to the awarding of the contract, tonight we're asking that the board would approve the award to Musgrove Engineering. And we had gone through quite a process in regards to having 4 different bidders come and present to a team that was comprised of Brooke Marshall, myself, Howard Royal, Director of Buildings and Grounds, Rob Ditch, who is the Wood River Middle School principal, who unfortunately had to step away, so he became disqualified from being able to participate, and Paul Conrad, who's the owner of Conrad Brothers Construction, was kind enough to participate with us and lend his expertise. So the committee heard 4 different presentations from 4 different entities, and the committee had selected Musgrove Engineering to actually provide the work associated with the engineering for that project. What we really realized tonight, we're really asking for 2 things. During that process, what we really certainly became apparent to us is that we were asking for engineering associated with a project. This project certainly will be between $1 and $2 million. And if I had to take my best guess right now, I'd say it'd be about 1.5 to 1.6. But the world could be very different in a year from now when we actually undertake this project. So certainly don't hold me to that number. Things could contract and drive the cost of everything up even further than it already has. Or if we move into a significant slowdown, we could see, the advantageous pricing. I really don't anticipate that to be the outcome, but it certainly is possible. So we will need somebody, and our selection and recommendation is to use Musgrove Engineering to complete that work. But as we were proceeding through this is kind of a complicated process, and replacing exactly what's there with something new might or might not be the best approach for the district. And considering what I just defined was really going to be an expensive investment by the district, we thought it made sense to ask Musgrove Engineering to conduct a scope of work for us and really sit down and analyze what system is going to be the best, whether that's going to be a system like that which is in there that would be a gas-fired system, or maybe a ground coupled system that would be similar to what we have at other schools that were installed during the McKinstry projects. So it's really a second ask of $18,800 associated with that scope of work. And in the document that was provided by Musgrove Engineering, you can see they have about 112 hours into defining that scope of work. They have multiple different levels of investment of time and evaluation. So it is a significant chunk of time. When I was first thinking about how long the scope of work definition might take, I was thinking foolishly that, this is something that might be less than 10 hours, but clearly I was completely out of my league in that evaluation. So you can see that there's about $15,600 in the scope evaluation efforts, and then there's some travel costs to come to site here from Boise, where where Musgrove is located. So there's a significant investment of time associated with this. So we're asking for the $18,800 for the scope of work, and then to award the engineering to Musgrove. Now, the cost associated with that Musgrove engineering part is typically either a derivative of the cost of the overall project. So tonight, we don't have a firm fixed price, because typically that might be 3-4% of whatever the overall cost of that project is. It is also possible for us to establish a firm fixed price, but Musgrove really needs to understand what the scope of project is going to be before they can actually define what that engineering cost is. So we as I mentioned, do have two asks tonight. The second one could have been inherent in the engineering aspect, but we thought it important to be fully transparent and disclose the aspect that the scope of work was what we thought a separate and second piece to the original ask. So we wanted to make sure that we presented both requests to the board tonight. So I tossed a lot of stuff at you there. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Trustee Turner?
Okay, so we're looking at a project, a 7-digit project, and that would be paid for out of a subsequent plant and facilities levy. Is that how this would kind of shake out?
Correct. The idea is for it to come out of the remaining proceeds of the plant facilities that we've collected. Now, there's two risks to that. One is that something else comes up and consumes money that we would like to use that project for. And then, of course, the second risk is that the costs of this project escalate beyond our ability to reserve funds to pay for it. But we have set aside about $380,000 this year, and we're planning on setting aside funds in next year's plant facilities to pay for a part of this project. So certainly we'd like to get this is one of those unfortunate circumstances where it isn't a question of whether we do this project or not. It's just a question of when we do it. And if we push it too far out, will the equipment fail between now and that time frame? So this was one of the projects that was on our original finance committee worksheet, if you remember, that we talked about. This is sort of a looming specter in our future, and that would be something that we need to take care of. So two risks there. One being costs are escalating faster than we have reserve funds. And the second one, of course, is that something else consumes some of those reserve dollars. But under a perfect plan, we would move forward with the engineering. That will take time. And then if we had to split the project and do part of it, not this summer, but the following summer, pass a levy in between those 2 points to pay for the second part, that would be a backup plan to the preferential aspect of just simply having the funds in hand and paying for that and implementing those the new system in our 21-20, I'll say the summer of 22.
So again, I think it highlights the critical nature of getting a plant and facilities levy passed soon. I mean, this is a big project. Just the second, as an aside, I mean, HVAC is right in the wheelhouse of this federal money that's coming out, air filtration and so forth. How would this potentially fit into a subsidized program? I mean, the government talks about supporting education, and they talk about air filtration quite a bit. So how would you kind of game plan something like that?
So this would fit nicely into item 14 of the defined usable aspects of the most recent COVID funds that were released. That's 935,000. It's a big chunk. So it would certainly be funds that we could use. We have those funds available to 2023 if we wanted to reserve those funds. That certainly would be a backup plan. In fact, I sent over an email to board members. A peer of mine in the next region over had forwarded some questions to the State Department in regards to use of these COVID dollars. And question number 7 was, since HVAC expenditures are an allowable expenditure, are there limitations on what kind of HVAC expenditures would be allowed? Sounded a little circular, but I didn't write the question. The answer was there are no limitations. I love the beauty of the succinctness of that answer, which means that we can use that for HVAC purposes without limitations. So that certainly would, could be a backup plan that we reserve these dollars, and between that and the funds that we will be setting aside in the plant facilities, we should have enough to cover this. And then if we do pass a plant facilities levy, it would free those dollars up for some other purpose, either in the next year's budget or the following year's budget.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there's always opportunity that might be some other governmental funds that come along that would, assist. They are working on additional COVID relief funds, or, back in Washington, keep hearing a number between 600,000 and a couple trillion, 600 billion. Boy, but I miss a few zeros there, right? 600 billion and a couple trillion. So, and there are set asides for school districts across the nation. So exactly what that'll look like remains to be seen, but there could be additional dollars that come down the pipe that would also provide some additional relief if necessary.
So Brian, I understand that you would like us to approve Musgrove Engineering for the scope of work for the 18,800. Is it unusual to ask to approve them as a firm to provide engineering services before we have a cost estimate? Or we obviously use them, if we're having them do the scope of work, they are obviously the people that we would be using from there.
Correct. Yeah, we don't have to. We just feel as though it's a more efficient use of the contractor. It's not unusual for the contract to hire a contractor to help us define what that scope of work is after we've selected them to be our contractor of choice. It might be a little odd if we were selecting them and then going back out for those engineering services. But since the committee believes that the engineering services should be rendered by Musgrove, we're just coupling that with the scope of work and asking for both of those items. So it's really a big package comprised of those two pieces.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion. I'm sorry, is there any other discussion or questions? Any more questions for Brian first? I'll entertain a motion for approval of Musgrove Engineering as the firm to provide the scope of work for the Wood River Middle School HVAC retrofit for 18,800 and to provide engineering services for the same thing.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll call the question. The motion is to approve the Musgrove Engineering as the firm to provide the engineering services and the scope of work for the Wood River Middle School HVAC retrofit. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for all your time and work on that. So there being no further business for the board to consider at this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second that.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Motion is to adjourn. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries, and this meeting is now adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Good
Thank
night.
you.